By now, you all probably know my other channel was hacked, but God has been good and we were able to get it back. So go check it out and watch the new videos. They're all up now. If you're interested in both long and short versions of stories from Chicago, make sure to subscribe to my other channel, Historical Event 36, so you don't miss out. On that channel, I'll be regularly uploading fascinating crime stories from Chicago, Texas, Los Angeles, and New Orleans, 2 videos at a time. These will include stories about GDs, BDs, Vice Lords, Black P. Stones, Bloods, Crips, and many other gang members in Chicago, LA, and Louisiana, covering projects like Calliope Project, Magnolia, Florida Project, Melpomene Project, and others. But hey, check it out. The story of Gabryel Gabby Ayers and the truth behind her death.
Ain't no key in there? I probably gotta put them in neutral. Well, I'll load, you know, some form. We probably gotta put them in neutral though. You know how to put it in neutral? From underneath. I'll show you. You gotta learn that anyway, huh?
Gabryel Gabby Ayers was a 24-year-old mother. She wasn't out in the streets looking for trouble. She wasn't armed. She wasn't a threat to anyone. She was a young woman raising her 14-month-old baby, an innocent mother whose life was taken in broad daylight. Like a horror movie, her child nearly lost their life too. The tragedy is layered and painful. Her own brother Risky Band was one of the shooters involved in the chaos. He was one of the top member and a shooter of a Risky Roads gang. Risky Roads formed early 2011, a subset deranged from the 4CH, Four Corner Hustlers, and Black Disciples. These ruthless people resides in the Wild Hundreds on 104th in Maryland. Risky Roads formed early 2011. The name came from a term they used called risk. They said this whole block, if a risk, meaning that standing on it, driving through it, and walking through it is taking a risk. Risky Road's main objective was to keep Martise Teesky Evans' name alive. I think it will be a good idea that I make a separate story of its own about Risky Roads. But as for Gabryel Gabby Ayers, who was killed, her boyfriend had ties to a gang, two which is in tour with sh0t mob. Those affiliations, those connections, that street life, whether she was actively part of it or not, followed her. And in the end, that environment cost her everything.
Block from St. Sabina in the middle of 79th Street, leaving one person dead and a second in the hospital. Our Sabrina Franza is there for us. And Sabrina, there was a child in the car that was shot into, correct?
Marie, the baby was in the back seat of this white car that you can see just here on 79th Street. It is right behind this larger vehicle that it later crashed into. After the shooting, 2 adults were in the car with that child when at least 3 people walked up and started firing. Incredibly, the baby was not physically hurt, but the entire incident was caught on video.
Look, y'all said, look, hold on. You said sh0t mob them, y'all top spankers. Each one of them just got caught. 2 pistols just got caught.
I don't know. Why you telling me?
Got caught. Name a block you niggas click with that ain't got touched
Why
yet.
are you telling me, brother? Why are you telling me?
Cause them y'all people, we spanking everybody that be with y'all.
Why you telling me, boy?
That means you sending them to their death. You bogus.
I ain't sending no
That's bogus as hell. That mean you sending them off.
Hey, look, bro. Hey, my little brother older than you, man.
You
Let
got his
grown people talk, man.
You got his Skrilla head. He came to the rack. What happened?
That afternoon, I wasn't thinking about if shooting will happen near to where I was. I had stopped to grab McDonald's, telling myself I needed to start eating better. Just a regular day. I've always said I spend a lot of time on the east and south sides of Chicago because I have family over there. That's normal for me. I was on South May in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood on a Wednesday afternoon when everything exploded. Gunshots rang out, loud, rapid, close, not distant, not somewhere blocks away, right there. At least 3 shooters ran up and opened fire. It wasn't random noise, it was organized chaos. Bullets were flying everywhere. Some of them hit my car, 3 separate holes punched through the metal. That's how close I was. And yes, I'm the one who captured the video that circulated. I know some people will say, "You wish," or call it cap. But it was me. I risked my life filming that moment. At one point, it even felt like they were about to turn the guns toward my direction again. If you remember that red car driving toward me in the footage, that was real. That was happening in real time. Back in the 1960s, 70s, and even into the 80s, gangs in Chicago, especially black gangs, didn't start the way people see them today. They began as neighborhood-based gangs, protection groups, social clubs, young black men organizing in response to poverty, segregation, systemic racism, and the need to defend their communities. Organizations and gangs like the Almighty Vice Lord Nation, 1957 to 1958, formed by young men like Edwin Pepelo Perry while incarcerated at St. Charles Juvenile Correctional Facility. When they were released, they organized in North Lawndale, originally focused on solidarity and protection. The Gangster Disciples, early 1960s, emerging from Inglewood. David Barksdale led the Devil's Disciples. Larry King Hoover led the Supreme Gangsters. After years of rivalry, they merged in 1969 to form the Black Gangster Disciple Nation. The Black Pea Stones, late 1950s, originally known as the Blackstone Rangers, founded by Eugene Hairston and Jeff Ford. In the beginning, many of these gangs operated with structure and codes. There were rules. Women, children, pregnant women, elders, they were off limits. Disrespecting the dead, harming civilians, selling drugs to kids or elders, those were considered violations, sometimes punishable by death. There was a twisted sense of order, but there were boundaries. The original idea, at least publicly, was to make communities safer, or at minimum, to control them in a way that protected residents from outside threats. But over time, especially through the 70s and 80s, these organizations evolved. They became deeply involved in drug distribution and organized crime. Territory wars intensified, power shifted, leadership fractured. The structure changed. Now we see a new wave, younger factions often referred to as YNs. Respect isn't based on leadership or organization anymore. It's often tied to body counts, that reputation, and social media presence. The more violence associated with your name, the more status you gain. That's why names like King Von, Shooter Shells, Big Op, TB, Lil B, KTS Von, Melly, and others became known. Not just for music or affiliation, but for the reputations tied to violence and lives lost. The street code shifted. What used to be boundaries have eroded. Now you have newer generations, people like Bloodhound Q50 and others, where the old rules don't seem to apply. Which we get to see in this story how sh0t Mob, a set well known on the east side of Chicago for its vicious activities, has been mentioned in connection to allegedly Gabby's killing. Allegations say she was shot close to 100 times. Whether every detail is confirmed or not, the brutality of it speaks for itself. An innocent mother was hit in a hail of bullets. Her baby was nearly taken too. There was no honor in that. No code, no protection, no justification. The Chicago Police Department has stated clearly, women and children should never be targets. But statements don't bring back lives. They don't erase trauma. They don't patch bullet holes in cars or hearts. The attack itself was horrific in both scale and brutality. On the afternoon of February 4th, 2026, in broad daylight, a 26-year-old woman and a 27-year-old man were seated in a white sedan near 79th Street and South May Street in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood. Multiple assailants approached and unleashed a barrage of gunfire. Witness accounts and video footage shared online captured a scene of chaos, several shooters running up to the vehicle, discharging dozens of rounds, and then fleeing. The car was left riddled with bullet holes, with shell casings scattered across the street near St. Sabina Church, and eventually crashed into a nearby van. Inside, the couple slumped over from their injuries, while a 13 to 14-month-old baby girl remained strapped into her car seat in the back, exposed to the trauma of what had just unfolded. Responders, including police officers and bystanders, quickly pulled the crying child from the wreckage. One witness recalled seeing the baby still clutching a lollipop, confused and crying, seemingly unable to comprehend the enormity of what had happened, only that her mother was no longer responsive. The young woman suffered multiple gunshot wounds and later died at the hospital. The man survived injuries to his arm and buttocks and is expected to recover fully. Miraculously, the child was unharmed physically, though those who witnessed the scene noted that the emotional and psychological effects of such trauma are immeasurable. Many in the neighborhood asked themselves in disbelief how anyone could target a vehicle carrying a child, let alone inflict such indiscriminate violence. What we are witnessing now is not merely an uptick in street violence. It is a profound and troubling shift in the culture that permeates some of Chicago's neighborhoods. Across the city, new factions of young individuals have emerged, self-identifying with names like YNs, forming small, tightly knit groups whose influence and reputation are often measured not by achievements or community contributions, but by the number of lives they claim. In this dangerous ecosystem, notoriety has become its own currency. To be remembered or feared is more valuable than respect earned through constructive means. This is why names such as King Von, Shooter Shells, Big Op, TB, Lil B, KTS Von, Melly, and others are repeatedly invoked, spoken with a mixture of awe, reverence, and dread. But the respect they receive is rarely tied to anything positive. Rather, it is rooted in the reputation for brutality, the fearlessness in committing violence, and the stories of terror associated with their actions. Within this mindset, cruelty becomes a benchmark, fear a form of authority, and the ability to assert dominance through aggression is elevated to an almost aspirational status for younger generations. These dynamics shape not only how young people see power, but also how they understand influence, worth, and survival in the streets. Yet, the trajectory of this violence has shifted in ways that are increasingly alarming. Members of newer street gangs, including individuals associated with Bloodhound Q50 and others tied to Shorty Mob on Chicago's East Side, are allegedly abandoning even the minimal street codes that once governed who could be targeted. Those unwritten rules, imperfect though they were, acted as a fragile safeguard. They maintained a semblance of humanity within a life defined by danger, establishing boundaries that typically shielded the most vulnerable, particularly women and children. Today, those boundaries appear to have collapsed, leaving communities shocked, angered, and grieving. The killing of a young mother in Auburn-Gresham, reportedly in a brazen shooting where nearly 100 rounds were fired into her vehicle, has magnified the heartbreak and outrage, casting a harsh spotlight on how extreme and indiscriminate modern street violence has become. Authorities and community leaders alike have reiterated that women and children must never be caught in the crossfire. The Chicago Police Department has emphasized that these victims are innocent bystanders in conflicts they did not choose, and local residents echo that sentiment with palpable anger and disbelief. The slaying of a mother carried out with reckless disregard for human life has been described as nothing short of a disgrace. Condolences and prayers have poured in for her family as people struggle to comprehend how someone could commit such violence, particularly with a child present in the vehicle. The very notion that a baby could be in the line of fire has stirred a collective outrage that crosses generational and neighborhood lines. Community leaders have spoken out, condemning the attack as a stark example of how reckless and unrestrained gun violence has become in Chicago. Father Michael Flieger of St. Sabina Church emphasized the shocking disregard for human life and expressed relief that the child might be too young to remember the event, even as he acknowledged the painful reality that she will grow up knowing her mother was taken violently in front of her. Vigils at 79th and May Street drew residents, faith leaders, activists, and city officials, including Mayor Brandon Johnson, who joined in calls for justice, accountability, and a renewed focus on preventing senseless bloodshed. The victim, later identified as 26-year-old Gabrielle "Gabby" Ayers, became the tragic center of a conflict that had been simmering online and in the streets for weeks. Observers noted public exchanges, disrespect, and threats between individuals associated with risky roads and members of No Limit, with tensions escalating to deadly consequences. Prior attempts on lives and public feuds foreshadowed the violence that erupted on 79th and May. While speculation continues about those responsible, pointing toward affiliations with Big Op and Shorty Mob, enforcement has not publicly named suspects, leaving the community in a state of tense uncertainty and grief. According to reports, the shooting occurred around 1:25 p.m., with 4 individuals in a red SUV allegedly pulled aside the white sedan and opening fire. Surveillance footage and witness accounts suggest the shooters may have initially driven away, only to return moments later and continue the attack before fleeing. By February 6, no arrests had been made, though authorities confirmed the investigation remained active. In a show of solidarity and urgency, St. Sabina Church offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to an arrest, and Cook County Crime Stoppers matched that with another $10,000, creating a total reward of $20,000. For longtime residents, the most painful aspect of this tragedy is not just the loss itself, but the clear evidence that previously respected lines have been erased. There was a time when even those entrenched in street life observed boundaries. Women, children, and the elderly were generally off limits. Today, that restraint seems to have vanished entirely. The killing of a young mother in front of her child has become a symbol of how far things have spiraled, a stark reminder of the human cost when rules and morality are abandoned in pursuit of power or revenge. As investigations continue, the Auburn-Gresham community mourns, hoping for accountability, while praying that such acts of brazen, public violence do not become normalized, and that a life lost so violently will not be forgotten. What we are seeing in Chicago's streets today is more than just a continuation of violence. It is the eruption of a new generation of gang conflicts, intertwined with long-standing rivalries, revenge cycles, and a disturbing escalation of tactics. At the center of recent attention is Big Op, one of the city's most notorious figures. Known on the streets for multiple killings and a reputation for fearlessness, Big Op has a complicated history. At one point, he operated under the name Drench Gang Pharaoh, but as law enforcement pressure and gang rivalries intensified, he adopted the Big Op alias to avoid prosecution and potential legal entanglements. He is also connected to the music world through his familial tie to G Herbo, which adds another layer of recognition and influence in both cultural and street circles. Big Op has long been embroiled in rivalries with other factions, most notably Risky Roads. The recent tragedy that rocked Auburn-Gresham has only intensified these disputes. The young woman who was killed, later identified as the sister of a Risky Roads member known as Risky Band, was not the intended target, but her death is inseparable from the web of feuds, threats, and retaliatory violence that has swept through the area. Risky Band and Big Op had exchanged threats online and over social media, including live FaceTime calls boasting about past attacks, questioning kills, and pressing one another for dominance in a culture where reputation is as crucial as survival. Shorty Mob, a younger generation aligned with Drench Gang and No Limit, NLMB, Never Leave My Brothers, is central to this escalation. Considered part of the broader Drench Gang NLMB umbrella, Shorty Mob has been actively involved in ongoing conflicts with Risky Roads and allied sets. Observers note that this younger generation is particularly aggressive, carrying forward old feuds while also forging new alliances, including connections with Bloodhound Q50 and Burly Boys, forming one of the most dangerous coalitions on Chicago's streets today. They have been linked to rapid retaliatory strikes, avenging fallen members such as Lil Scoom and Lil Jeff, and remain on the hunt for adversaries. The culture of retribution has reached a fever pitch. Observers describe members as operating almost like demons, intent on eliminating any opposition, leaving little room for restraint or mercy. The cycle of retaliation has been relentless. What began as interpersonal and gang-level feuds, threats and back-and-forth attacks between Big Op, Risky Band, Shorty Mob, and allied gangs has escalated into a broader street war. This includes conflicts involving Bloodhound, NLMB, Fatso, Risky Road, and the 95th Street factions. Violence now occurs with alarming frequency, affecting multiple individuals on both sides, and leaving bodies and shattered communities in its wake. Many argue that one side has taken a more aggressive role, initiating attacks, while the other often responds defensively, yet neither appears willing to step back. The result is a cycle of conflict that tests the limits of street alliances and enmities, while simultaneously escalating danger for anyone in proximity, whether directly involved or innocent bystanders. The most devastating illustration of this ongoing cycle occurred on the afternoon of February 4, 2026, in Auburn, Gresham. Around 1:25 p.m., a 26-year-old woman and her 27-year-old boyfriend were sitting inside a white sedan near 79th Street and South May Street, just steps from St. Sabina Church. Suddenly, multiple shooters approached and opened fire in a barrage so intense that witnesses described it as sounding like repeated explosions. The car was struck dozens of times. Estimates range from 50 to nearly 100 rounds fired, before it crashed into a nearby SUV. Inside were 3 lives: the young woman, her boyfriend, and their 13 to 14-month-old baby girl strapped into a car seat in the back. By the end of the attack, the woman had been killed, the man wounded, and the infant left to witness trauma far beyond her years. Miraculously, the child was physically unharmed, though neighbors and first responders immediately recognized that the emotional and psychological impact could be lifelong. Witnesses recalled the baby still holding a lollipop amidst the chaos, confused and crying, while her mother slumped over from gunshot wounds. The boyfriend was transported to Christ Medical Center and is expected to recover from injuries to his arm and buttocks, while the mother was pronounced dead at Little Company of Mary Medical Center. The crash into the SUV added further disruption, though fortunately, the driver of the struck vehicle was unharmed physically. The community's response has been one of shock, grief, and outrage. Leaders like Father Michael Flager condemned the act as a stark example of the reckless, indiscriminate nature of modern street violence. Vigils drew residents, faith leaders, and city officials, including Mayor Brandon Johnson, highlighting the urgent need for accountability and justice. The killing of an innocent mother in front of her child has become a symbol of the broader consequences of these feuds, the way disputes over reputation, revenge, and control can spiral into tragedies that engulf those who had no involvement in the conflict. Reports indicate that the perpetrators were likely members of Shorty Mob or allied factions, carrying out the attack as part of ongoing retaliation against Risky Roads and associated sets. Prior incidents, including the killing of Lil Scoom and Lil Jeff, and subsequent retaliatory attacks by Bloodhound and Shorty Mob, suggest a calculated and unrelenting strategy aimed at domination through fear and lethal force. Residents and analysts alike have drawn comparisons to war zones, noting the level of coordination, volume of firepower, and sheer audacity of these attacks. For many, the conflict represents not just gang warfare, but a broader societal failure, an environment where disputes between young men escalate into deadly attacks that claim innocent lives. In the days following the shooting, law enforcement remained active but cautious, noting the difficulty of making arrests in situations where witnesses are reluctant to come forward due to fear of retaliation. Community initiatives, including monetary rewards offered by St. Sabina Church and Cook County Crime Stoppers, aim to encourage tips, yet the cycle of vengeance continues, leaving residents to navigate grief, fear, and uncertainty. Ultimately, the Auburn Gresham shooting, along with the escalating conflicts involving Big Op, Risky Roads, Shorty Mob, and allied sets, represents a disturbing evolution in Chicago's street culture. What was once a dangerous yet somewhat constrained set of boundaries, protecting women, children, and elders, has been dismantled, replaced by a culture where aggression, retaliation, and notoriety are paramount. The result is a community forced to bear the consequences of unchecked violence with innocent lives, including that of a young mother and her child, caught tragically in the crossfire. The young woman who lost her life was later identified as the sister of a local rapper known as Risky Bands. In certain circles, that connection carries significant weight. Risky Bands is associated with Risky Road, a faction that has been deeply entangled in ongoing conflicts with rival sets across the city. Over time, disputes between these sets have played out not only on the streets, but also online, with social media exchanges amplifying tensions and spreading challenges in real time. Posts, live videos, and public disses are not trivial. They function as public statements of power, reputation, and influence, and they can quickly escalate private disputes into deadly confrontations. For some observers, the young woman's connection to Risky Bands raised immediate questions about motive. In communities where affiliations and loyalties carry deep significance, family members of prominent figures can become unintentional yet highly visible targets. Her position as the sister of a well-known rapper placed her in a particularly vulnerable spot. While authorities have not officially confirmed that her death was directly tied to these affiliations, many community members and street observers believe the attack was at least partially motivated by ongoing conflicts surrounding her brother. Adding another layer to the tragedy, the woman's boyfriend is said to have his own network of affiliations. Reports indicate he was connected to BOG, a set with alliances that intersect with Risky Road and other local factions. In environments where loyalty and rivalry dictate safety, these overlapping connections can compound risk, making individuals targets for multiple reasons. Some believe the boyfriend may have been the primary target, while others suggest that both individuals in the vehicle were deliberately endangered due to their ties, creating a grim calculus in which affiliation equates to vulnerability. The nature of the attack itself fueled further speculation. Witnesses described the driver's side of the vehicle as being heavily targeted, raising the possibility that the shooters were aware of who occupied each seat. Whether the assailants intended to target one person specifically or both, the level of precision and aggression indicates planning, not a spontaneous act. This was no fleeting exchange of gunfire. It was sustained, coordinated, and relentless, a barrage that continued even after the vehicle crashed into a nearby SUV. For many in the neighborhood, that persistence left little doubt that the perpetrators were determined to ensure a fatal outcome. Beyond the web of affiliations, rivalries, and possible motives, the human cost is undeniable. A young mother's life was cut tragically short. A family lost a daughter and sister. A child was left to grow up without the protection, guidance, and love of her mother. And a community already burdened by recurring cycles of violence has been forced to endure another layer of heartbreak. The location of the shooting adds additional weight to the tragedy. It occurred mere steps from St. Sabina Church, an institution long recognized as a center of anti-violence activism, community outreach, and support for youth and families. For decades, St. Sabina has worked tirelessly to provide a safe haven in a neighborhood often defined by instability. To have such a brutal act occur so close to a place devoted to peace underscores the persistent challenges facing Auburn Gresham, highlighting how deeply entrenched cycles of violence have become. Residents of Auburn Gresham are no strangers to hardship. Like many Southside neighborhoods, it has faced systemic inequities, economic strain, and the long shadow of gang activity. Yet it is also a community filled with families, children playing on sidewalks, and neighbors who look out for one another. Incidents like this fracture that sense of safety, reopening wounds that have never fully healed, and reminding residents of the fragility of peace in their streets. As investigators continue their work, reviewing surveillance footage, collecting evidence, and interviewing witnesses, no arrests have been announced. Detectives are piecing together the timeline of events, how the shooters approached the vehicle, whether there was a chase beforehand, how long the attack lasted, and what specific factors led to that moment of violence at 1:25 p.m. Speculation remains rampant both online and in the neighborhood, yet law enforcement has urged patience, emphasizing that establishing motive and responsibility requires careful analysis of relationships, communications, and physical evidence. Until that work is complete, much of what circulates is theory layered atop a deeply real and tragic event. The scale of the violence is indisputable. Dozens of rounds were fired. The car was riddled with bullets. The vehicle crashed in the middle of the afternoon. One mother was killed. A man was wounded. And a baby, spared physically by what seems almost miraculous, witnessed the event unfold in a seat barely inches from danger. The ripples of grief have extended far beyond the immediate family. Friends, relatives, and neighbors have taken to social media to express sorrow, disbelief, and anger, questioning how anyone could fire so indiscriminately into a vehicle known to carry a child. Even in a context defined by rivalry and retaliation, many have recognized that a line was crossed that should never have been approached. The emotional and psychological impact of such an event cannot be overstated. Trauma does not vanish when the sirens fade. It lingers in homes, in conversations, in the minds of children who overhear adults attempting to explain the inexplicable. It lingers in witnesses who replay the sound of gunfire, the smell of gunpowder, and the chaos of that moment. It lingers in the young child whose mother was taken, leaving her future shaped by grief she cannot yet comprehend. Experts in child psychology emphasize that even when young children survive physically, exposure to extreme violence can have lasting consequences on development, emotional health, and behavior. Counseling, family support, and a stable environment will be essential in mitigating these effects. The young woman's connection to risky bands is significant not merely because of familial ties, but because it illustrates how street rivalries operate in intertwined and relentless ways. In neighborhoods where loyalty and affiliation govern social dynamics, family members of prominent figures can inadvertently become extensions of their relatives' influence and, tragically, targets. While she had her own life and presence in the streets, social media activity and online exchanges, posting messages, responding to conflicts, or even commenting on deceased individuals, may have further amplified her visibility and vulnerability. Her boyfriend's connection to BOG further complicated matters. Together, their affiliations created a convergence of risk. He potentially a target of rival factions, she caught in the crossfire by association. While early speculation suggested that the attack may have been aimed solely at him, evidence and witness accounts now indicate that she may have been targeted deliberately or at least knowingly endangered. The attack's intensity, coordination, and sustained nature point to a level of planning that made both occupants potential victims. Local leaders have responded with a mix of sorrow, outrage, and calls for action. Father Michael Flieger, pastor of St. Sabina Church, spoke with deep urgency. For decades, he has been a leading advocate against violence in Auburn Gresham, offering support to families and creating programs aimed at reducing gang activity and youth involvement in crime. Thank God the baby is so young, they probably won't remember this day, but they will know that their mother was taken from them, Pfleger said. He emphasized the severity of the attack, noting that the shooters were armed with long guns. This is unacceptable. Somebody needs to be held accountable. If anyone knows who did this, the cameras in the area may give us the evidence we need to catch them. Justice is long overdue. Kirk Bell, the godfather of Gabriel Ayers, expressed similar grief and disbelief. "What's the purpose of shooting at a car when you know there's a child inside?" he asked. "It doesn't make any sense. These are animals. They have no value for life. There are gangs, shootings, and killings happening every day in this city. It's just unbelievable. My goddaughter's baby survived physically, but the emotional scars will never heal completely." Auburn Gresham itself is a neighborhood rich with culture and resilience, yet burdened by persistent challenges. Once filled with laughter and community life, the streets now often echo with sirens and gunfire. Leaders stress that incidents like this are part of a broader trend across Chicago, where shootings and homicides continue to rise despite interventions from police, social services, and community organizations. Systemic inequities, limited economic opportunities, and entrenched gang activity contribute to an environment where violence has become tragically routine. Yet the death of a young mother in front of her child still resonates as an acute shock to the community. In response, residents, activists, and faith leaders have called for accountability and information sharing. Community outreach emphasizes that silence perpetuates cycles of violence, while cooperation with authorities may prevent future tragedies. Faith leaders, including Father Pfleger, have offered prayers not only for victims and their families, but also for the perpetrators, seeking accountability, change, and where possible, redemption. At the center of this story is a young child, physically unharmed yet emotionally affected. Her future has been irrevocably altered by the loss of her mother. Experts note that the earliest interventions, consistent support, and counseling will be essential to help mitigate the psychological effects of this trauma. Her survival is both a blessing and a reminder of the cruel randomness of such violence, a living testament to the stakes for families caught in these cycles of retribution. Ultimately, this shooting on 79th and May is more than a single incident. It is a window into the complex realities of street violence, affiliations, and long-standing rivalries in Chicago. It is about lives intertwined with networks of loyalty, rivalry, and retaliation, and about how ordinary days can be violently transformed into moments of irreversible tragedy. At its heart, it is about a young mother taken too soon, a family left to grieve, a child left to grow up without her mother, and a community forced to reckon with the persistent reality of violence in its streets. Analysis of the footage that has circulated online provides a harrowing window into the attack, revealing just how methodical and calculated the violence was. Observers and commentators have highlighted that the gunfire appeared heavily concentrated on the driver's side of the vehicle, where 26-year-old Gabriel Ayers, the young mother who lost her life, was seated. This detail alone suggests an alarming level of precision. The attackers did not merely spray bullets indiscriminately. Their movements, positioning, and focus indicate a premeditated effort to target specific individuals within the car. According to witnesses, the shooters approached from a side street, moving with a level of coordination that seemed almost choreographed. They took positions strategically. One approached the driver's side armed with a Draco, a firearm known for its compact size and high rate of fire, while another positioned at the rear fired through the back window, and a third remained across the street, shooting from a distance. The layering of positions, angles, and concentrated gunfire demonstrates a level of planning and intent that surpasses any notion of spontaneous violence. The vehicle itself became a trap. After the initial shots, Ayers' car crashed into a nearby street, but remarkably, the shooters continued their assault even after the crash. They seemed determined to ensure the outcome, following through with relentless fire. Observers have noted that the level of coordination, shooters simultaneously positioned around the car, firing in a continuous barrage, indicates not only knowledge of who was inside, but also careful timing and premeditation. Some speculate that the assailants may have been tracking the vehicle beforehand, awaiting the precise moment to strike, fully aware of the occupants' identities and positions. In communities where sending messages through violence is tragically normalized, the attack likely served multiple purposes: as retribution, as a show of dominance, and as a public warning to rival factions. Both the young woman and her companion, her boyfriend, were potential targets, illustrating the cruel way affiliations and relationships can magnify vulnerability. In environments defined by loyalty, rivalry, and interwoven family connections, anyone associated with prominent figures or groups can become a target, regardless of their direct involvement in ongoing conflicts. Witness accounts emphasize that the driver's side was disproportionately hit, suggesting that the shooters may have been aware that Ayers was in that position. At the same time, the companion seated next to her may have been an equally significant target due to his own affiliations with BOG, a gang with overlapping alliances to Risky Road and other local sets. The attack, therefore, was not merely a single target strike. It was a demonstration of power aimed at multiple individuals, both symbolically and physically. The presence of Ayers' 14-month-old daughter adds an unbearable layer of human tragedy. Miraculously, the infant was not physically harmed, despite being strapped into a car seat in the back as bullets tore through the vehicle. Witnesses describe the child sitting frozen, a lollipop clutched in her hand, as chaos unfolded around her. For many observers, the survival of the infant is a rare glimmer of relief amid devastation. But experts caution that even without physical injury, the psychological and emotional impact of witnessing such violence at a formative age can be profound and long-lasting. Trauma at this level can shape a child's development, affecting emotional regulation, social interactions, and perceptions of safety for years to come. The loss of a mother under such circumstances creates a void that cannot be replaced, leaving an enduring emotional burden that will shape the child's life. From a street dynamics perspective, the attack underscores how intertwined reputation, affiliation, and visibility are in certain communities. Gabryel Ayers' social media activity, including her engagement in exchanges, diss tracks, and public commentary, even toward individuals who were deceased, may have contributed to her heightened visibility and, tragically, her vulnerability. In neighborhoods where online presence is closely monitored by rival factions, even seemingly minor posts or interactions can escalate into real-world confrontations. The attack at 79th and May demonstrates how quickly digital interactions, public perception, and personal affiliations can culminate in lethal violence. The interplay of street politics and online behavior has created an environment where actions in both spheres are inseparable, and the consequences can be fatal. Risky Bands, the young woman's brother and a local rapper with a visible presence in the community, has publicly responded to the tragedy. His grief and anguish reflect the compounded layers of loss and danger that exist in these environments. Losing a sibling to such a violent and senseless act is devastating in any context, but for someone already embedded in ongoing disputes, the impact is amplified. Social media posts and public statements reveal both mourning and the complexities of navigating life within a landscape defined by rivalry and visibility. Observers note that his response underscores the personal toll of street violence. It is not abstract, it is deeply human, and it reverberates through families, networks, and neighborhoods. In the days following the attack, a solemn vigil was held in Auburn Gresham to honor Gabryel Ayers. Residents, faith leaders, and city officials gathered at the intersection where the shooting occurred to mourn her loss and demand accountability. Father Michael Flager of St. Sabina Church delivered a heartfelt address, emphasizing the lifelong impact on Ayers' infant daughter and stressing the urgency of holding the perpetrators accountable. He announced that the church would match the $10,000 reward offered by Cook County Crime Stoppers, raising the total incentive for information leading to arrests to $20,000. Pfleger, a longtime advocate for anti-violence initiatives in the community, highlighted that surveillance cameras in the area may have captured crucial evidence and urged anyone with information to come forward. Mayor Brandon Johnson also addressed the gathering, acknowledging the profound grief caused by repeated gun violence, while emphasizing the need for both justice and long-term solutions to the root causes of violence. State Senator Willie Preston echoed these sentiments, condemning the perpetrators and pledging to ensure that they are prosecuted. The gathering, marked by grief, resolve, and solidarity, reflected the community's determination to confront the ongoing cycle of violence that has repeatedly plagued the neighborhood. The scale of the attack itself is almost incomprehensible. Dozens of rounds were fired, the car was riddled with bullets, and the vehicle crashed in the middle of an afternoon, shattering any sense of normalcy. One mother was killed. A man was wounded. A child was forced to witness horror from the safety of a car seat. The images of the aftermath, bullet-riddled vehicles, shattered glass, and shell casings scattered across the street, convey the destructive power of this assault. Beyond the physical destruction lies the emotional toll. Families mourning, neighbors traumatized, and a community reminded once again of the fragility of life in neighborhoods where conflict is ever present. Even as speculation swirls regarding motive, affiliations, and retaliation, the heart of the tragedy remains painfully clear. This is not a story about strategy or street politics. It is about lives irrevocably altered. Gabrielle Ayers is gone. Her child is left without a mother. Her family is plunged into grief. Her community is forced to confront yet another violent event in a pattern that has tragically become familiar. The affiliations and online disputes that may have influenced the attack provide context, but they cannot mitigate the pain, loss, or trauma that have resulted. The incident also serves as a stark reminder of the intersection between street culture and technology. Online activity, social media interactions, and public exchanges are no longer separate from the dangers of the streets. They are part of the ecosystem in which violence, reputation, and retaliation intersect. In this environment, visibility can be deadly, and what might appear trivial to outsiders can have life or death consequences. The events on 79th and May underscore the urgent need for understanding, intervention, and community support to prevent such escalations from claiming more lives. Ultimately, the shooting of Gabrielle Ayers is emblematic of a larger cycle of violence in Chicago, reflects a convergence of street affiliations, family connections, rivalries, and retaliation, all unfolding in public view. At its center is not strategy, but human suffering. A mother taken too soon, a child forever changed, and a community struggling to process grief, fear, and anger. The incident is a painful reminder that the consequences of street violence extend far beyond the individuals directly involved, leaving ripples that affect families, neighborhoods, and the very fabric of community life. The tragedy of it all, Gabby did not deserve to die because of who her brother was. She did not deserve to die because of who she was dating. She did not deserve to be caught in a storm of violence that had nothing to do with her choices, her character, or her life. Her baby did not deserve to grow up without a mother. A 14-month-old child, barely able to walk or understand the world, was strapped into a car seat, surrounded by chaos, hearing bullets tear through metal and glass. That child survived physically, but the trauma of witnessing such violence, at an age too young to comprehend fully, will leave an imprint that stretches far into the future. That child will grow up with the knowledge that their mother was taken in an act of street retaliation, a reality that no child should ever be forced to face. This incident is not just a tragic headline. It is a stark illustration of how far the culture of violence has fallen from whatever codes once existed. There was a time when certain rules, however flawed, however incomplete, served to protect the vulnerable, women, children, the elderly. Those boundaries, fragile as they may have been, have collapsed. When women and children can no longer be guaranteed protection, it signals that something has broken deeply within the social fabric of these communities. It is not just a single act of violence. It is a symptom of a culture that has normalized cruelty, fear, and retribution above human life. No woman should ever be targeted. No child should ever be within earshot, let alone the line of fire. And yet, that day in Auburn Gresham, those lines were erased. It is heartbreaking. It is agonizing. It is unnecessary. And it is a reminder that the consequences of street violence extend far beyond the individuals directly involved. For every person who survives, there are witnesses, neighbors, friends, family, whose lives are forever changed. For every bullet fired, there are echoes that linger in homes, in playgrounds, in the hearts of those who saw the chaos unfold. For those who were there, who heard the gunshots tearing through the afternoon, who felt the car shake as bullets struck, who saw their community fractured in an instant, that moment stays with you. It does not fade. It becomes a memory that arrives unbidden, a sound that lingers in the mind, a shadow over ordinary days. Prayers for her family, prayers for her baby. But beyond prayers, there is also a question of accountability, of justice, of examining how society, systems, and culture allowed a young mother to become a target in the first place. How did it come to this point where a person's life could be taken for affiliations, for connections, for grudges that had nothing to do with her? It is a sad reality, and it did not have to end this way. The tragedy is not only in the loss of Gabby Ayers, it is in the knowledge that the world failed to protect her, failed to protect her child, and failed to maintain a moral line that once existed. Her death is a stark reminder that the costs of unchecked violence are immeasurable, reverberating through families, neighborhoods, and the generations to come. In remembering Gabby, we are forced to confront the deeper questions. How did we allow a society to normalize such cruelty? How do we prevent a child from witnessing a world where safety is optional and bullets decide the future? And most importantly, how do we honor her life in a way that ensures this tragedy does not simply repeat itself? What happened to Gabby reflects something deeper, a breakdown of whatever street code once existed, a shift from structured organizations with rules to chaotic violence without boundaries. It's devastating. A young mother lost her life. A child will grow up without her. A family is grieving. And a community is left asking how it got this far, how we went from protect the neighborhood to no one is safe. Prayers to her family. This didn't have to happen. And the saddest part is, it feels like it didn't even have a purpose. Just loss. As we approach the end of the story of Gabby Ayers, it's important to pause and reflect on the deeper meaning behind everything that happened. Beyond the headlines, beyond the affiliations, beyond the online debates and speculation, there was a young woman, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a human being with a life that mattered. Her story is painful, layered, and complex, but within it are powerful lessons that deserve careful thought. These lessons are not about gossip or sensationalism. They are about understanding how tragedies like this unfold and how they affect individuals, families, and entire communities. First lesson, violence does not stay in its lane. One of the clearest lessons from this tragedy is that violence never remains confined to its intended targets. Conflicts may begin between specific individuals or rival groups, but they rarely end there. They expand, they ripple outward, they engulf people who may not have chosen to participate in any dispute at all. When gunfire erupts in a neighborhood, it does not ask who is directly involved and who is not. It does not check for innocence. It does not consider motherhood, childhood, or bystanders. Once violence becomes normalized as a method of communication or retaliation, the circle of harm widens uncontrollably. Gabby's death illustrates this devastating truth. Regardless of speculation about motives or affiliations, the outcome demonstrates how quickly street conflicts can consume those adjacent to them. What may have been intended as retaliation or a show of dominance ultimately resulted in a young mother losing her life and a child being traumatized. Violence, once unleashed, rarely stops where it was originally aimed. Second lesson, associations and visibility can increase vulnerability. Another difficult but important lesson is how proximity to conflict through family ties, relationships, or even online presence can increase exposure to danger. In environments where loyalty and rivalry are deeply embedded in social dynamics, associations carry weight. This does not assign blame. It does not suggest responsibility for what happened. But it does acknowledge reality. In tightly interconnected communities where disputes are ongoing, connections can make individuals more visible and, tragically, more vulnerable. In today's world, visibility is amplified by social media. Online exchanges, comments, live videos, and public affiliations are not isolated from real-world consequences. They are part of a larger ecosystem where reputation, pride, and retaliation intertwine. What may feel like digital expression can be interpreted as provocation, allegiance, or disrespect in certain circles. Gabby's story reminds us that modern conflicts are not confined to physical spaces. They move fluidly between streets and screens. And in that overlap, risk can grow in ways that are not always immediately obvious. Third lesson, the impact on children extends far beyond the moment. Perhaps the most heartbreaking element of this tragedy is the presence of a 14-month-old child. Physically unharmed, yes, but emotionally exposed to an unimaginable moment of chaos. Experts in child psychology consistently emphasize that early exposure to violence can shape development in subtle and lasting ways. Even if a child cannot consciously recall an event, the body and brain can register stress, fear, and instability. Trauma does not require memory to have impact. Beyond the immediate event, there is also the lifelong absence of a mother. Milestones, first day of school, birthdays, graduations, will carry a space that cannot be filled. The emotional weight of growing up knowing your parent was taken in an act of violence is profound. This lesson forces us to think generationally. Violence does not only affect the present, it reshapes the future. It influences how children understand safety, trust, and stability. It creates emotional burdens that can echo for decades. Fourth lesson, community silence and fear perpetuate cycles. In the aftermath of tragedies like this, communities often respond with vigils, prayers, and public statements. Those are meaningful acts of solidarity, but long-term change requires more than mourning. It requires collective courage. In neighborhoods where retaliation is common and fear of speaking out is real, silence can unintentionally allow cycles of violence to continue. Witnesses may hesitate, information may remain unshared, and in that silence, accountability becomes harder to achieve. Community protection must extend beyond emotional support. It must include active cooperation, mentorship for youth, economic opportunity, and sustained intervention efforts. Violence thrives in environments where fear outweighs trust. Breaking that pattern requires both systemic change and individual bravery. Gabby's story highlights the importance of community responsibility, not in assigning blame, but in recognizing that preventing future tragedies requires collective action. Fifth lesson, the erosion of boundaries signals a deeper cultural shift. There was once a widely discussed narrative, however imperfect, that certain individuals were considered off-limits in street conflicts, women, children, elders. Whether those boundaries were always upheld is debatable, but the perception of limits created a psychological line. When those lines disappear entirely, it signals a deeper cultural shift. It suggests that retaliation and dominance have overtaken restraint. When women and children are no longer shielded from violence, it reflects not just individual decisions, but a broader breakdown in moral boundaries. This lesson is not about romanticizing the past. It is about recognizing that when no one is considered protected, instability becomes normalized. Communities cannot thrive under conditions where every affiliation, every relationship, every public interaction could potentially place someone at risk. Gabby's death feels particularly painful because it confronts this uncomfortable reality. It challenges the belief that some lines will always remain intact. My final thought, at the center of all analysis, speculation and discussion is a simple truth. A young mother lost her life. A child lost her mother. A family lost a daughter and sister. A community lost another piece of its sense of safety. Gabby did not deserve to die because of who she was related to. She did not deserve to die because of who she loved. And her child certainly did not deserve to witness a world where gunfire interrupts an ordinary afternoon. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how violence evolves, how communities respond, and how easily ordinary lives can be caught in extraordinary tragedy. If there is anything to carry forward, it is the understanding that every life is interconnected. When one is taken, the damage radiates outward, into families, into neighborhoods, into the next generation. The hope, fragile as it may feel, is that reflection leads to change. That stories like Gabby's are not just remembered for their pain, but for the conversations and actions they inspire. Because behind every headline is a human being, and behind every act of violence is a ripple effect that reaches far beyond a single moment.